You want to advance. That's why you're listening to this podcast. You want to advance your leadership, your life, your career. So today we're going to do that with Andrew Bryant talking about self-leadership.
Welcome to Advance with Mike Acker, the podcast designed to help entrepreneurs, business leaders, and professionals alike break through barriers by improving their practical leadership skills and increasing confidence in speaking. Your host is a best-selling author, executive coach, and founder of the Advance Public Speaking School and Advantage Publishing Group, two companies dedicated to providing an edge for leaders. Find out more about Mike at mikeacker.com. Now here's your host, Mike Acker.
Andrew, there's this dichotomy sometimes between this desire to feel human and be connected in the workplace. And then on the other hand, there's this need, there's this struggle to get things done because ultimately we've got to produce something to the masses. So talk to me about how can we be human and deliver results?
You know, that's the question I asked myself when I thought about writing this book. Because the reality is, if you're a manager, if you're a leader, and you don't deliver outcomes, your tenure is temporary. You will not last. So you could be the most engaging, empathetic human being, but if you don't deliver results in the cruel world of business, you won't last. So how do you do both? Well, in the book, I quote the US Navy SEALs who say, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. The slowness is getting to know your people, getting to know how they're motivated, what's important to them, getting to know your customers, getting to know your stakeholders, and connecting at a human level, and therefore you can deliver the results. Because if you push for results, but your people drop dead on the march, again, your results will not be sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm looking forward to diving into this more with you and self-leadership. But before we do that, who are you, Andrew? And what can you tell us a little bit about your background? Why should we listen to this conversation?
You know, again, that's a question that you should ask, because everybody on the internet is an expert on leadership. And how the hell did I get here? I started my career actually as a physiotherapist, and in the US you call that a physical therapist. I was a good science student at school. I was going to be a doctor, but they merged my boys' grammar school with the girls' high school just before my A-levels, and for some reason I got distracted. Physiotherapy, yeah, you like that, right? It's human, right? And I was delivering the wrong kind of results. So I did physiotherapy, which is a very practical science, and I did a couple of years in hospitals, so I saw how organizations work. And then I did what most male physiotherapists did in the UK, is I got involved in sport. And this is the early 1980s, the birth of goal setting, the birth of coaching, and I was right there on the cutting edge. And we were asking questions around, how do we help people perform? How do we get the best out of people? And it's not just the physical, it was the mental. And so that was the beginning of my curiosity about the difference that makes the difference. Yeah. I developed my business in physiotherapy. I took postgraduates in acupuncture. I studied psychology. I was always curious about the human condition. I moved to Australia, and in working with sports teams in Australia, I get the phone call from a managing director who says, Andrew, you've helped my sports team improve. Can you come and work with my management team because they suck? And that was the beginning of my career, or my career transition into corporate. I went in with a blank sheet of paper, and I watched and I observed, and I noticed what was working, what wasn't. Yeah. Now, I had imposter syndrome because I didn't have the right degree in business. So I went off and did an MBA, as everybody does. You have to do a Master of Business Administration. Off I did, and I ended up arguing with my lecturers. And one of them said, well, you got some good ideas. Why don't you write your own book? And well, the rest, as they say, is history.
So here you are with a couple of books, and the newest one, the New Leadership Playbook. I'm curious to see on this idea of performance, what does contribute to high performance? And a lot of the people that I'm talking to are either at that spot of high performance or wanting to be high performers. What contributes to high performance?
Well, let's look at it from the leadership perspective. And I put a formula in the book, which is clear expectations times ability and mindset times right behaviors. So right behaviors is everything. You have whatever it is in terms of performance, it is behavioral. How did you turn up? How did you say it? How did you do it? It's just not what you do, it's how you do it. And that's the right behaviors. What moderates our behaviors is our mindset. And that is only, mindset isn't everything. We talk a lot about mindset, everything. You have to have the capability as well. But all of that is driven by right expectations. So if we don't have the right expectations of ourselves, we won't perform. If we are asking our team, our people to perform, and we don't set the right expectations, they'll go off on the wrong direction. So what I would tell an individual, what I would tell a manager or leader is get yourself a mirror. Because if you're not getting performance, if you're not getting the performance you want, look in that mirror and start with self first. Because you can't lead others unless you first lead yourself.
What do you think is some of the ways that people are thinking that's holding them back? So what's their mindsets that are negative?
Yeah, well, and the concept of limiting belief, limiting mindset. There's a great book by Carol Dweck who talks about growth mindset, and what she articulated nicely is the research around the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. With a fixed mindset, we constantly defend our position, and we're trying to, maintain our ego and say, I'm okay, I'm doing all right.
Yeah.
With a growth mindset, we're open to learning, which is part of self-leadership, self-learning. We're going to do this interview and we'll look back at it later and we might consider our performance. And I could say, I fluffed that answer. I could have done it better. Now, a fixed mindset would go into denial and rationalization. A growth mindset would be, well, how could I do it better? Maybe rehearse the answer better for next time and not see myself as a failure for not being perfect.
Right.
And so that need to be perfect holds a lot of people back. And that perfection isn't even their own vision of perfection. It is that which they acquired from their parents or their school or from some kind of framework that gave them this is perfect. And perfection impedes progress.
Sorry to interrupt there.
No, go ahead.
I'm thinking, how do people, like someone's listening right now and going, well, what's my mindset? How do people know if they have a fixed mindset? If they know if they got a victim mindset? How do they know what kind of mindset that they're currently in?
Well, a simple way is, how do you take feedback? If somebody says to you, hey, Mike, you could have done this better, right? Is your first reaction, pushback, aggression? Is it defensiveness? Is it self-recrimination? Or is it curiosity? Mm-hmm. Right? Where are they coming from? Do they have a positive intent? What are they seeing that I'm not seeing? Is there room for improvement? So the former, the defensive, the denial, is the fixed mindset. Mm-hmm. The curiosity is the growth mindset.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So if someone's looking right here going, if I'm real with myself, when my boss came in and said this, or when my spouse said this, and got defensive and got kind of down on themselves, then that's a good realization that you might be leaning more towards this fixed mindset. And by the way, I've read that Carol Dweck book. That's a great book for people to grab a hold of. And if they're moving towards that, they're already, once you realize that you're in that spot, it's already a step in the right direction. But how do you then move away from this? And what are some things that we can tell people to lead themselves better? What are some self-leadership tips that we can give?
Yeah, well, it's separating me from behavior, right? So the definition of self-leadership is the practice of intentionally influencing your thinking, feeling, and actions towards your objectives. So it is a practice, right? Which means
you got to say that again, because that's good. I'm sure that's in your book, but you got to say it again.
All right. So it is a practice of intentionally influencing your thinking, feeling, and actions towards your objectives. Now, the key here is it's a practice, right? Taking a shower is a practice. When we take a shower, we smell good. If we don't take a shower for a few days, we smell bad, right? And it's the same with self-leadership. I've been writing, teaching, coaching about this since the 1990s. But my wife, every now and again, if I'm having a meltdown, will say, "Hey, Andrew, go self-leadership yourself." Right? So,
so much empathy.
oh, well, you know, I'm married to a Brazilian. When you're married to a Brazilian, you know you're alive because death is so close. So no, but she's my greatest supporter because she believes in the best possible version of myself, right? And she's a great supporter for that. And so it is a practice, which means I still react. The question is, how quickly do you notice that? You go, because our reaction, our limbic system, as it fires off in nanoseconds. We can get defensive. We can go into denial very quickly. But if you can get to, hang on a moment, that's not the best the best result or the best behavior within 2 to 3 minutes, and you can take a breath and smell the flower, blow the candle, smell the flower, blow the candle before you press send on the email, then that's a good state interrupt to start getting better and saying, how can I best turn up for this? And whether you're an employee or the boss, right? Walking into a meeting, the question, how can I best turn up to get the outcome for me and for the other person is the intentionality where you're leading yourself and therefore better able to influence and lead others.
So I think there's a lot of people who just feel stuck at times. And, I've been in self-leadership. I feel like I've done that well, but then I'm here and I'm stuck and I'm not getting further, or I'm stuck in my career. I'm stuck in, what do you talk to a person who feels stuck? One, that's a fixed mindset, right? I am stuck.
Oh, well, it can be. But I mean, if you're recognizing you're stuck, firstly, we've got to be a little bit kind to ourselves. So I think there's a huge danger. I mean, I've been reading positive psychology, success books since my late teens, right? And I think we put ourselves in a lot of pressure that we're supposed to be in the high performance zone all the time. And realizing we've come out the end of 2.5 years of pandemic where a lot of people work from home and, we're burnt out, fatigued. I think sometimes, you need to take a break from something. You need to disengage. We don't have control or delete on the keyboard of ourselves, but every now and again we need a reboot. And I think it's okay to do that. If you have to take the afternoon off and go to the movies or you go for a walk in nature or you do something to reboot. I don't think we should feel guilty about that, because every time I've ever done that, I've come back recharged and ready to go. I find, particularly working with leaders, is that they fail to stop, take a breath, and maybe celebrate how far they've come. When we feel stuck, it's because often we're looking down the road. Oh my God, I've got so much further to go. Taking a moment and turn back and say, look how far I've actually come, and have a moment of celebration of that loosens up the stuckness. Right. So I think that's the first one. Then sometimes it really is just interrupting yourself, right? Go and do a bungee jump, or take a salsa class, or just do something that shakes you out of the routine that you've been doing. So sometimes it's just an interrupt that gets you to see the world in a different way.
I think it's great to take a pause, and I just encourage everybody, you guys who are listening to this or watching this on YouTube, take a pause and think about what have you done that has gotten you to where you're at. I'm personally guilty of that, Andrew. I'm always thinking about what I got to do next, and my next thing. I want to start this company, want to do this thing right here, want to build the second one of this company over here, want to write the next book, want to speak at the next engagement. I got a TEDx coming that I'm speaking at in September, but you know what I'm already thinking about? What's the next TEDx that I'm speaking at? And there's just so much of that next. And I think you're speaking to me and probably so many other people right now that just, hey, let's just pause for a moment and celebrate where we have come and what we have done and what we have gotten through. And maybe not even just celebrate, because I think there's times where we need to mourn. Okay, we did do something that didn't result the way we wanted to. I was working with a client this week. He's talking about one of the startups that he had that failed. And it's just how he had to take time to really grieve that loss of that company. And whether it's celebrate, whether it's mourn, whether it's reflect, whether it's learn, I think you're hitting something really really needed right there?
Well, there's a couple of pieces of this. I was on a podcast by a finance guy who was talking about your worst failure, and I said something that he got really excited about. I said, look, in business you talk about sunk cost. You put all this money into this startup and you're trying to make it work because you've invested so much. But there comes a point when you've got to go, it's sunk cost. It isn't going anywhere. I'm never going to get any more money out of this, and I have to get it go and move on to the next thing. And I said, you may have lost the money, but you never lose the learning, right? Nobody ever calculates the education of that. And that's hugely valuable. And anybody who has got a successful startup usually has 3 or 4 failures before they get the successful one. So we don't calculate what that learning is until it's a lot later. So that's part one. The other thing I would speak to the pause piece is, I talk in the book a lot about motivation because, as leaders, we have to motivate people, or as self-leaders, we have to motivate ourselves. And in motivation, we feel motivated when we put in effort and we feel like we get reward, right? And if that reward is valuable to us and it gets recognition from others, then it's reinforced. I think we often are stuck, and I'm speaking from my own life. I'm 61, so I've had some stuck moments. Trust me. Is whenever I felt stuck, it's because I felt like I'm not seeing any result from the effort.
Yeah.
Right. So if somebody's in a career and they're working their tail off and they haven't got the promotion, they haven't got the recognition, they haven't got the pay rise, they're going, I'm stuck, because they're putting in the effort and they're not seeing the progress. So sometimes we have to step back and say, well, where is the progress? Is it in learning? Is it in social capital that I have not yet spent? Right? Maybe you've been working really hard and you've built up some social capital. Now it's time to ask for that favor. Hey, boss, I've just delivered this project that's, made the company X million dollars. Maybe now it's time for you to sponsor me for my next role.
Yeah.
And then that's how you get out of the stuckness. But, I'm not prescribing this for everybody. Obviously, prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. My first degree, right? Yeah. But yeah, I think stuck happens. The issue is that nothing's permanent. Everything changes, right? I mean, there's the motto, this too shall pass, will make those people who are in a rough place feel better, and those people who are in a great place feel worse, because, it's the nature of life. This too shall pass, right? If you're having a wonderful time, hey, it may not last. And if you're having a rubbish time, that's not going to last either. So the resilient individual, those people that can bounce back, are the ones that can zoom out from the challenge and go, okay, what's happening here? And in my book, in both books, in fact, I use the chess analogy. I love chess because it is a metaphor for life. It's a game of strategy, and it's a game where you can get stuck. But if you take a moment, don't react, zoom out, look at the board, and you go, hang on a moment, if I move that, and then I move that, and then he moves that, there's a way out. And there's always a way out.
Yeah. Talk to us about that resiliency, because it's something that has shown up in obviously the Navy SEALs, and there's been some books, but maybe someone's here hasn't read those, hasn't really talked about that. What is something that helps someone be more resilient?
Well, step one is to recognize that wherever you are right now, whatever's happened to you, you have survived to date the worst day of your life. Right? And it's a surprising thing, and people go, "Well, that doesn't help," but it does, because a lot of what we look at is, oh my God, it's going to be worse, right? We make it about us. It's happened to me. I mentioned it being permanent or pervasive. Right? It's about everything. It's going to be on forever. No, I've already survived the worst. I've resolved previous problems and found solutions, and it's that self-belief, I can do it again. And that's what resilience is. It doesn't matter where I am. It's not about being down. It's about the realization that I will bounce back. And it's not wallowing in it's all about me. It's never going to change. This is temporary. What resources do I have? What options do I have? So one way of thinking about self-leadership is it's about options and opportunities. And options is choices. What choices do I have? And opportunity, and you may or may not know this, but the root of the word opportunity is it's a wind. And it's just like a typhoon or a hurricane of winds. An opportunity to the Romans was a wind that blew you back to port. So if you were on a boat and you were stuck, the wind dropped, boat's not moving anywhere, you need to prepare the sails, prepare the boat, because a wind will come and you need to be ready to catch that wind back to port. And that's what opportunity means. And I think those people, you and I both work with people who've been remarkably successful. What they have done, and other people call it luck, but what you and I know when you interview these people is that they were prepared for the opportunity.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite statements, or this came from a guy that used to be on my staff, and people said, man, he said, everybody always calls me lucky. And he didn't mean to quote, but he ended up quoting, I don't remember who originally said it, but it's, when I work hard, luck happens.
Yeah, I think it was the golfer Arnold Palmer who said, the harder I work, the luckier I get.
Yeah.
Which was, because people would say, oh, that was a lucky shot. Yeah. And the more I practice, the luckier I get. Right.
Right. Right. And, he went on to go do amazing things. And it's that hard work. Now I'm thinking about him. His name is Jay, and he started his own company and such. He's doing amazing things. And when I look at Jay, one of the things I think about is not only the hard work, but he's also got an amazing attitude. And his attitude has kept him through some of the tougher moments. Talk to me a little bit about attitude and how that role plays, and how can we change our attitude so maybe we're kind of in this mindset and we're listening to this and going, man, I am down. I do think I'm a failure. I do feel like I've messed up here, there. Talk to us a little bit about attitude.
Okay. Well, mindset and attitude could be interchangeable. I love I don't know whether you're old enough to or too young to remember Zig Ziglar, the American motivational speaker, who used to say, it's not your aptitude, but your attitude that determines your altitude. Forgive my terrible Southern US accent. But
I was wondering what you were trying to accomplish with that accent right there.
No, not very much, apparently. So thanks. So the way I always address it, and whether we're doing it for ourselves or doing it for somebody else, is you need to turn the attitude is a construct. It's in somebody's head, but how it's recognizable is in a narrative. What are they saying to themselves, or what are they saying externally? And as a coach, I get to hear those narratives. What is somebody saying? How are they framing it? Things are terrible. I'm never going to get out of this. I'm stuck. Is a narrative which creates an attitude of more stuckness. Whereas if the attitude is, okay, it's not great, all right, but I need to accept the reality. What do I need to adjust? What can I do differently that'll help me advance? And you've got 3 A's there, which is an acronym I talk about in this book, which is accept, adjust, and advance. Step 1 is to accept where you are. If you go to an accountant, right, about your finances, they're going to say, well, what are your assets and what are your liabilities? And they add it up and go, this is where you're at. And you might go, well, it's not where I want to be. Well, denial isn't going to help you. You got to go, okay, this is where I am. Where do I want to be? Well, I want this amount in the bank, or I want to buy a house, or I want to pay off my car or my student loan, whatever it is. Then you go, okay, what do I have to adjust to move forwards towards my objectives? And what is your narrative about this? Right? Is it impossible, or has somebody else done it before? If somebody else has done it before, does that mean I can do it? What did they do before that I can role model and copy? And that's one of the reasons I wrote this book, because I kept being asked, well, what is that? Let's write it down so that they can get better. And there's no shortage of information out there today, as you know.
Right.
You just have, most of it's, you don't have to buy this book, right? You watch the podcast, you glean it. However, the people who have the great attitude are investing in themselves and go, this 9 inches between my ears is the most expensive real estate I'll ever own. So let's feed this with the good stuff so that I'm able to accept, adjust, and advance.
I love that little acronym right there. When I think of mindset and attitude, I always think about one is something that I internalize and one that is something that I externalize, but there's a play between the two. So mindset is what I'm doing, it's how I'm thinking, it's what's happening in my brain. And then attitude is how I'm externalizing that mindset. But it's very interesting because I love what you said there about what you're feeding yourself. And what you're doing externally will affect you internally. And what you're doing internally will eventually come out externally. And I think that's a huge, those 3 A's, I think that's a huge way to change it. Like, okay, what's affecting my attitude? This happened. I didn't get these results. The pandemic. I love that accept right there. Adjust and advance and move forward and have a plan. How do you help people plan to move forward? Think about that advance. You got this playbook. So what are some of the plays that you put together that is helping people advance?
I'm happy to share. I just want to finish off what we were talking about with a real story. I mean, you mentioned the pandemic, right? So I coach C-level leaders and executive leadership teams. And, like you, I speak to audiences. At the beginning of the pandemic, I was on the phone to one of my CEO clients, and he was figuratively in the fetal position because he had, he'd been a CEO before, but he'd been dropped into this company to turn it around. He had done a rebranding of the company, put the team together. Metaphorically, the plane was on the runway, the engines were revving, and he was ready to take off. Pandemic hit, and the forecast for the next 2 quarters were horrific.
Yeah,
and he took it on himself initially, and he's in the fetal position. Why is this happening to me? This was my big runway. And I, as his coach, and we've known each other a long time, and I was able to just slap him upside the head and say, "Hang on a moment, this isn't about you. You're the leader. People are looking to you. You need to shift your mindset and your attitude because people are looking to you. If you lose hope, they lose hope. And then you're definitely not going to get this out." Now, he turned it around. He got on the phone to all of his team and he said, "Okay, we're going to get out of this." And I'm pleased to tell you, in fact, I had a call with the same guy beginning of this week, and they've just had 3 straight huge record-breaking quarters.
Wow.
So there is a tangible, physical, financial benefit from fixing this. Right?
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I think there's in emotional intelligence, and one of my friends, Steve Gessler, he says that emotional intelligence is whole awareness of what you're doing and with yourself and your soft skills. He says it's maybe a soft skill, but it has hard edge value. I think that's what you're saying right there. You have to add to this mindset, but it turns around and creates revenue. And a lot of times people are going, well, let's go productivity. Let's do the task. Let's do the demands. Let's hit the KPIs. But there's so much in just that relational, emotional attitude mindset that ends up creating this on the outside.
Hence the subtitle of the book, Being Human While Successfully Delivering Accelerated Results. Now, to your question about how do we go about this, how do we plan this? I approached the book with creating this framework, clear expectations, times mindset and ability, times right behaviors equals results. So that's the framework. I think the framework is driven by principles. Now, a lot of leadership books, and trust me, I've read a lot of them. In fact, I'm external faculty on 2 universities. I teach on MBA programs. A lot of leadership books are at 30,000, 40,000 feet. And they talk about, this is the values, etc. This is the vision. And I went, well, no, we need to be a little bit more practical. We need to firstly look at, well, what are the principles of leadership? And I often get asked, what's the difference between a principle and a value? Well, a value is something that we put importance upon. So it could be a principle. But values are different for different people in different contexts. Every company I know has integrity as a value. Well, but why? Integrity means doing the right thing when nobody's looking. Do we have to write that, or shouldn't that be baked in? Because the principle behind that is, if you do the wrong thing, it's going to come back and bite you. That's the principle. Sure, yeah. If I've got a pen here, the principle is if I let go of this pen, you and I know what's going to happen. It's going to fall, which it does every time. So that's a principle of leadership. So in the book, I articulated 7 principles, one of which we've already talked about. Self-leadership comes first. And then the principles drive plays. And I borrowed from the American football analogy of a play, a set piece of moves, because I wanted to give managers the conversation. Each of the plays is fundamentally a conversation. The objective setting conversation, the feedback conversation, the career conversation, the coaching conversation. How do we actually have those conversations? And I was talking to somebody just a little while ago who said, who had actually been passed over for a position, and they said, I was doing some of the plays, and some of the plays I was doing some of the time. Now I've read the 12 plays. If I had been doing all of them all of the time, I wouldn't have been passed over. Now I know what I need to do to move forwards. So the strategy is knowing how to have this. And I identified, maybe there's more, I don't know, but I identified 12 specific conversations that we have as managers and leaders on a regular basis. And what do they sound like?
Okay, so you got my mind going a whole bunch of different places right here. So I actually already put your book in my cart because I think it's a fascinating conversation. I love the idea of you got these principles leading conversations, and now the conversations come the actions.
Yep. Now the conversation, I mean, because a conversation in itself is an action, but for instance, let me deconstruct one to make it tangible for you. Would that work?
Yeah.
So the one that is the one that most of my clients find gives them the most immediate and tangible response is the feedback conversation.
Okay.
Now, we all know that feedback is the breakfast of champions, but sometimes it tastes like cardboard, right? We don't like it. I worked in Asia for 18 years where feedback can very quickly be misconstrued as criticism. Mm-hmm. So how do we give feedback to people in a way that they can absorb it with a growth mindset? And there's a framework in the book, FIF, fact, impact, future. Fact. Can we articulate feedback in a way that we are observing a behavior without making it about the person? I mean, right now I'm looking at you and say, hey, Mike, I noticed that, your hand is on your chin. Now that's no judgment. It's an observation. It's neither good nor bad. It is. Mm-hmm. Is there an impact of your hand being on your chin? Well, for me, it means you're being thoughtful, right? So is that good or bad? Well, probably good. So therefore, in future, you could continue to do that while listening. So we've got a fact, we've got an impact, we've got a future. Now, if we're doing that,
I was doing something like this, which is crossing my arms across my body and hunching up my shoulders. The fact is what I'm doing, the impact is it looks like I'm closed off. The future.
It could be. Now, you might be cold, you might have a coffee stain on your shirt, all of the above might be true. But I could say, hey, Mike, I noticed that you go into meetings, right? And you and I were in that meeting just yesterday with the buyers, and you were there with your arms folded. Mike, what do you think the impact on our buyers was with you with that posture? What do you think they might have thought? And you go, oh, they might have thought I was closed off or defensive or aggressive or great. Okay. So is that the impact you want? What could you do differently in the future? So we're giving feedback in the form of questions. Yeah. And that's much more likely to be received with growth mindset rather than defensiveness.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's fantastic, because often what we do is we come to the conclusion for people. Hey, I see you crossing your arms. This is what you're doing. You're turning people off. You're coming across aggressive. You're coming across standoffish.
Yeah.
And don't do that in the future.
Yeah. So you just got told. Now, who of us likes to be told? None of us like to be told. Right. I mean, look, feedback's everywhere. I mean, AI gives us feedback. I remember, in the book, I talk about the future of work, which is where we need to partner with AI, not see it as a resistance. And I use Grammarly. Now, I went to a grammar school, and English is my first language, but I'm not perfect. And I'm using Grammarly on my documents and on my LinkedIn posts or whatever, and it corrects. And I get a monthly report from Grammarly. It says, your English is above this level of other Grammarly users, and I feel pretty good because I'm up there because I'm into grammar school. But it says this is the tone. you're 47% neutral, but you're only, you're 25% direct, but you're only 1% friendly. And I'm like, oh, now what's the impact of that? Do I want to be more friendly? Should I be more friendly? Is this something I want to do about that? So AI is giving me feedback.
Yeah.
Now, if anybody's got a Fitbit.
Why do you think that we are responding differently? Because I don't think anybody's got mad at Grammarly for
you could swear it.
But I mean, we would if someone said, I read this and it seems that 47% is neutral, et cetera.
Yeah, you're spot on, right? I mean, do you get mad at your Fitbit when it said you only did 7,000 steps and you wanted to do 10,000, right? It is what it is. It's a fact, right? And I think the really important thing as any manager or leader is to get to those observable behaviors. The problem is, even if you articulate that, the person receiving, and about communication, is that the communication is being decoded by the individual. And we're all sensitive to judgment, right? And the more fragile our ego is, the more sensitive we are to judgment. And so if somebody gives us that feedback about our arms folded, or our use of language being not friendly, oh, I'm being judged. Instead of, they're giving me the feedback, that's useful information for me to move towards my objectives.
Yeah.
So we have to frame feedback always. And with anybody who works for me, I say, look, let's sit down. I have some feedback for your improvement. And if anybody gets defensive, I'd say, look, I don't have to give you this feedback, right? Honestly, I could just keep it to myself. The fact that I'm investing time means I believe in your growth and development. I hope as much as you believe in your own growth and development. Mm-hmm. Right. Sometimes we have to give, and this is a gift to anybody watching this. Sometimes we have to give feedback on people's ability to receive feedback.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love this fact part, because I think there's even something in the way that we're communicating the fact. We got to be careful that that's when we're not saying you do this and kind of a more aggressive, very subjective approach to the fact. You don't communicate well. Okay, well, you don't communicate well is a massive judgment, and it will get massive defensiveness. Right. So you use, I observed when this happened. Did you have, were you aware of that? Right. So frame it as a question, Right. And then you go into the whole, what impact do you have? And then, I think I love what you're saying, because I did a video, I don't know, about a year ago, and I talked about leading with questions. And it's a huge thing that I talked about, that in leadership, if you can lead with questions versus telling people what to do and become the answer person, be the question person. But I didn't provide a framework for it. And I think what you're doing here is providing a framework, a system of questions to lead with questions. And
and this is just one of the.
Are you aware of it?
This is just one of the 12 conversations, right?
Yeah.
So you can understand I had to come off the mountain of leadership professor to, what are the conversations? And the reason that this, and I have to give credit to one of my clients. I was coaching the CEO, coaching the executive leadership team, and the chief people officer said, this has been fantastic, but I need this for my frontline managers. And could you write a book for them, or a manual for them? And I said, yeah, but I want to hold on to the IP, which is why I have this. But it was great, because if I was too abstract, right, she would call me and she said, well, yeah, that's great. But so I actually had somebody who works with managers on a daily basis in her organization saying, I need the actual conversation. Mm-hmm. And so I took the feedback that I couldn't just give them the principle. I had to script the conversation. And the feedback I've subsequently got from everybody who's read the book thus far is then now I get it. Yeah. Now it's practical. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think leadership principles can be so ethereal, and that at the end of the day, sometimes they're like, people just tell me what to do. And I'd see that in some ways there's a need, with so much stuff going on now, there's a need for more, just tell me what to do. Like, I want to understand why I'm doing it, but then tell me what to do and break it down for me. And I like that you're I like the FIF. That's a great, break it down.
I think, I'm not, I think people, I'm not sure it's tell me what to do. I think it's, maybe it is, but I think it's show me what to do, right? Now, I went through medical training in the United States.
What I'm going for that on that, Andrew, is that there's so much, like right now, there's so much vague. There's here, there, here. And so sometimes when I'm working,
absolutely.
It's just like, okay, Mike, I now understand what I'm not doing right. Yeah, tell me, show me, we need it, point it out.
Yeah, we need to make it tangible for people.
Yeah.
And we live in a world of information overload, and particularly in the leadership space. I mean, when I thought to write this, I'm like, who needs another leadership book?
Right.
Because there's so much has been written and by some great people, but there was this need for to break it down. I'm sure, as I said, I don't like the word. I know what you mean by tell me what to do, but I think people want to go role model it for me. And if you've ever had a concept or been around doctors, how do doctors and nurses learn? Mm-hmm. Well, when I went through medical school, it was see it once, do it once.
Yeah.
Right. So the first time I gave a patient an injection, right, I'd seen somebody else give an injection, and they said, right, now it's your turn. Mm-hmm. So you don't have a lot of time to second guess. You go, okay, so when you're shown, you pay attention because what's going to happen. I did a postgraduate in acupuncture, so I stuck a lot of needles in people. The poor person that, got my first treatment, suffered. I got better over time. So I think we shouldn't be, as you say, I love that you use the word ethereal. Yeah. Leadership isn't ethereal. Leadership happens every day. If you've got kids, you're involved in leadership.
Right.
Right. Just getting your kids to bed on time, getting your kids to do their homework is an exercise in leadership.
Yeah.
I've been president of 2 professional speaking associations. And being a leader of a volunteer organization of speakers who fundamentally are, they talk about leading cats. Well, try leading cats on amphetamines, right? I get it. Yeah. And you've been around speakers, right? So everybody's got an opinion, everybody's got an idea. And honestly, I learned more from working, as a leader in a volunteer scenario than I did when I was leading my own company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, one of the things for years I was in the nonprofit world, and it was such a great way to build leadership is how do you influence people to take action when you have nothing to hold over them in terms of finances or jobs or security. You have to influence them to want to do what you're leading them to do.
And that's the first play, having that why conversation. Now, of course, our friend Simon Sinek got famous with his TED talk on, begin with why. He wasn't the first person to come up with a concept, but he got it branded and he articulated it beautifully. And you have to have that why conversation even before the objective setting. This is why it's important for the organization, voluntary or commercial, and this is why it's important for you.
Yeah.
And I think leaders often fail. Oh, this is important for the shareholders or the stakeholders, but why is it important for you? Well, you're going to grow, you're going to get more scope, you're going to get more confidence. This is going to give you some more exposure, more visibility. This will be another skill that you can be using as in your career. Right. Addressing those whys so the individual is intrinsically motivated rather than you having to use a carrot and a stick.
Yeah.
And that's key.
Well, I think this is great. And this has been a great conversation. Talk to us about where people could find you, where can people find your book, and where can they connect with you on LinkedIn? And we'll put all those links inside of the show notes and YouTube as well.
Yeah, well, follow me on LinkedIn. I post regularly and you'll get some content there. You can follow me on YouTube. Self-leadership.com is my website. Self-leadership.tv will take you to my YouTube channel. And if you specifically want to go to the book, it's thenewleadershipplaybook.com, but you can find that off selfleadership.com. And of course, it's available on all regular online bookstores. Download the Kindle or the paperback version and let me know what you think of it. Put it into action.
Love it. And I love that it's a playbook and I can see how tangible it is. No, I really appreciate it. Andrew, this has been fantastic. Thanks for being on the program, the show today. Looking forward to sharing this with my network.
Yeah, my pleasure, Mike. Thanks for that. And let's stay connected.
Absolutely. And to all of our guests and all of our viewers, thank you so much for taking some time to listen to the conversation, to tune in. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, pass it on to somebody else, make some comments, and check out the links that we'll put in the show notes as well. Until next time, this has been Mike Acker with Advanced Interviewing, talking with Andrew Bryant.
Thanks for listening to Advance with Mike Acker, a podcast designed to provide an edge for leaders through improving practical leadership skills and increasing confidence in speaking. Mike is a best-selling author and business owner who has helped many leaders increase their skills and their confidence, propelling them to new heights in their personal and professional endeavors. Join an incredible group of professionals taking the steps to become better leaders at connect.stepstoadvance.com. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.